But what I think is really going to be uh, really start to change people's minds is that we're going to realize that all of biology is programmable. And what I really hope to see in the next 3 to 5 years is that we cross this threshold in synthesis and assembly that allows us to build single-celled organisms, bacteria. Like that's how all life started on this planet, billions of years ago, single-celled organisms. And as that becomes not science, not history, but engineering, I think we just unlocked this incredible new level of science where we get to build living creatures.
I'm so excited about this interview. I get to hang out with somebody who I greatly admire. He's he's changing the future, not just for himself, but for all of us. Andrew Hessel is joining us. He's somewhere in some type of secluded location. I hear a Canadian accent when he speaks, but he does have that San Francisco Valley grit. Which one is it? Canada, San Francisco? Where are you from?
I've got one foot in both of those worlds. I'm Canadian and a U.S. citizen. I've got a house in California, just north of the Bay Area in wine country, my favorite spot. And currently, I've got a place in Canada as well. And so that's where the kids are going to school.
I'm going to throw this term out, the Human Genome Project. We've heard about that. Where were you active in this whole? By the way, is it genome or genome? Genome or
Okay.
genome?
Maybe it's my Canadian accent, but I call it genome. Yeah, so where was I? Man, in the first genome project, the Human Genome Project, which was stood up by the Americans to read the human genome. That was conceived in the 1980s, launched in 1990, and it ran until 2003. I was part of that project through on the corporate side because I was working with a major biopharma at the time, and we were one of the first to partner with Craig Venter's Celera Genomics, which was just, motoring through the human genome. And of course, ultimately, it was declared a tie between the corporate and academic groups,
Oh,
with all humanity the winner. Like, I loved that whole period of my early career. In 2015 and into a launch in 2016, I was really privileged to be one of the co-founders of the successor of that project, which is the Human Genome Project. Right, not reading the genome this time, starting to bring people together to be able to write a human genome. If you think about it, being able to read the human genome promises diagnostics and an understanding of our bodies and health and disease. Being able to write the human genome, which is going to take a long time and tons of work to be able to achieve, gives us the opportunity to be able to correct any genetic disease in the short term, and potentially even shape the future of humanity in the philosophically in the long term. It's huge. Plus, being able to write a human genome means you can write all the smaller, simpler organisms, and that just is a huge lift to the entire biological economy, so to speak.
is there a Moore's law in your industry?
Yes, there is. It's called the Carlson curve after Dr. Rob Carlson, who started graphing out the rate of change in DNA sequencing and DNA synthesis technologies. And although he didn't give it a name, The Economist magazine wrote an article about Rob and these graphs, and they called it the Carlson curve. And eventually he just had to accept it because it became everywhere. And what's interesting about the Carlson curve is it was outpacing Moore's law by up to 5x. Sequencing technology is one of the fastest evolving technologies on the planet, being able to read DNA, and synthesis technology, synthesis and assembly, being able to write DNA, is moving exponentially, but it hasn't had the super exponential turbocharging that sequencing has had, in its history, but it's coming.
And has it changed even more since AI is available now?
Well, AI is definitely, accelerating all of biotechnology because now we can take all this knowledge, some of it which is pretty arcane and difficult to interpret. And genetic code, for example, is just A, T's, G's, and C's. You can't, it's not human readable, but it's machine readable. And so AI is now giving us new capabilities, both in understanding, biological data, being able to design and engineer biological systems. And just literally less than 2 months ago, AI systems were used for the first time to actually design and build a biological organism, a small virus that infects bacteria. But this is one
Wow.
of those pioneering breakthrough, papers that really shows, the potential of what's coming. We're already using AI tools to design proteins, for example, proteins and peptides, and that's amazing because proteins are really the components of biological systems that do all the heavy lifting, and nature has created billions of proteins, if not hundreds of billions, but that's only scratching the surface. Today,
But when we
AI tools allow us to explore the entire protein universe.
And I know we're talking about something small when we talk about a protein, but how about something big? The company I think is called Colossal Bioscience, where they're trying to bring back species from the past that are extinct. Are they using AI to do that as well as the
Yeah,
genomics?
all the work happening at the forefront of life science is AI assisted in some way, shape, or form today. Colossal had built a whole suite of bioinformatics tools, many of them that were AI based, to assist them with their design and engineering work. They're essentially doing, I would look at it as high volume edits to existing animals to give them the phenotypes of recently extinct animals. But that being said, DNA synthesis and assembly technologies, as they become more powerful, will ensure that nothing has to go extinct anymore. Any recently extinct animal, if we have the code for its genome, for its program, we'll be able to bring it back.
Yeah, but
So
that's but wait, this is
Colossal's
really
really
important.
pushing it forward.
Real
Yeah.
quick, Andrew, this is important. People don't realize we're not really bringing back the woolly mammoth. We're utilizing a component of the past woolly mammoth and merging it with an existing elephant or something like that. Correct?
Yeah, I believe it's the Asian element, and they're making a huge number of edits to the Asian element genome to give it characteristics of the woolly mammoth, and similar with the dire wolf. So these are highly edited, genomes of existing animals, giving them traits of an animal that's been recently extinct.
And the
But
reason why is because we don't have the actual original DNA because it's lost, or why?
well, we may have the full genome because sequencing technologies allows us to take even very fragmented DNA and build what we call the consensus, the sequence, by assembling all the fragments computationally. But if we're trying to program and build an organism from scratch, we have to be able to build the genome. And that means we have to write the entire genome of the organism precisely from the electronic file that we have. And right now, our synthesis and assembly technologies are kind of pushed to the limits, writing a few million base pairs of DNA code. And to write an organism like ourselves or the dire wolf or the dodo, you have to be able to write a few billion base pairs of DNA code. And that technology just doesn't exist today, but it will absolutely exist in the future. So Colossal is leading the way, leading the charge to this de-extinction process, getting a huge amount of attention and building amazing teams for doing this type of work, and really, preparing, laying the runway for when our synthesis and assembly technologies are several orders of magnitude better than they are.
But you said something interesting. You said, or ourselves. Are you thinking that we might be able to have like a backup of ourselves in the future?
This is something I love and I've been championing. If we can de-extinct the woolly mammoth, the dodo, the dire wolf, and other creatures, we can de-extinct ourselves. All we have to do is literally store our biological material, some cells in our DNA in a way that preserves that material cryogenically, keeps it in storage, and then lay the foundations to be able to return as a clone in the future, when, and I believe this 100%, in a future where cloning is accepted and legal as similarly to IVF. In fact, cloning and IVF are so close in terms of the technologies that it's surprising that we, given that we've had about 14 million children born using IVF, that we have not yet seen the first human clone appear and be verified. I think it's just a matter of time at this point.
Awful.
More than that, on the forefront of animal cloning, and we've cloned something like 30 different mammals now. We've cloned camels and dogs and horses and cats. But what we're starting to see on the very forward edge of cloning is we're not just accepting the clone, we're now making edits to the clones. In fact, when you look at the work that Colossal is doing, say with the dire wolf, those are cloned wolves that have had massive edits done to it to make it, similar to a dire wolf. So it's not enough just to clone anymore. Now we can essentially engineer on top of that cloning process. And I believe that's the future for many of us as well. For example, if I'm in my early 60s, if I die at say 85 and I know that it was a particular cancer that took me out in the end, then on the next life cycle, if I am cloned, we might want to really survey my genome to look for the failures that produce that cancer, for the particular for the particular genetic elements that made that cancer likely to appear, and tweak those so that I won't get that cancer in the second life cycle,
God,
and
I
so
just
on
think
and so
about
on and so on.
I think of a Peter Diamandis, Ray Kurzweil thing, then uploading your brain to some type of quantum device and then downloading it back to your clone to where your consciousness is somehow moved around. But that's sci-fi stuff right now. I want to step back. Wait. Don't take this because that's a whole interview all on its own. I want us to go back in time for a second. 55, if you were born in 1955, it was a magical time for a lot of the people that are around today that are changing the planet. That's when Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Scott McNeely, Eric Schmidt, they were all born at that time. And that's because when they were teenagers, the Heath kit and the computer started popping up, the personal computer. And then someone like myself and you, it was the Radio Shack TRS-80, the Trash 80. I used to sit in Radio Shack all day long for months and months and months. But that was the catalyst to get a lot of us excited about technology. Is there anything in the biology side to get a younger generation excited today so they're going to make massive changes 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years in the future?
Yes. Just last week in Paris was the biggest gathering of young synthetic biologists, these young people really on the forward edge of this field. They gathered in Paris for a few days. It's called the iGEM competition, International Genetically Engineered Machines. There were about 6,000 students that landed in Paris just for a few days to share their projects, to share, to really come together and meet each other, see a huge exposition and have amazing speakers, really inspire them and push them into the future. It was amazing. I was in Paris just for a few days before the iGEM competition, doing some related events for that particular meeting. But and I love the iGEM competition. I think this was its 21st year. I was an ambassador for the program earlier in my life. I've supported it in many different ways. The one challenge that I have with it is that it is very difficult to scale because it's in person. It's always required a lot of mentorship. It requires access to laboratories, etc. So what I've been championing kind of um, the online version of the iGEM competition, which is essentially a robotic lab. What you might think of as a cloud lab, just like we have cloud computing today, but this is a cloud laboratory where to do experiments, you just have to have access through a computer or tablet. You design a biological experiment, you design genetic code, it's all of the physical manipulations are done in this robotic
But is that going to
laboratory.
expire or get kids excited? I mean, I'm thinking something more
Oh my
like the
God.
lines
No,
of
it. Yeah.
of like Legos or sea monkeys. You know what I mean? I'm being serious. Something that's like a tactile, like I could experience. Is there anything like that that's coming up?
Well, there's always been hands-on kits. There's a group called the Odin, the Open Discovery Institute, that sells kits where you can start to do this at home. There's been other groups like that. Amino Biolabs is another one, and there's community labs as well. There's Gen Space and Counterculture Labs, and there's all these other labs, but they all anything that you have to order a kit, anything where you're doing it at home, anything where there's physical overheads. It just doesn't scale that easily. It's not like computing where you bought a box and that's all you needed to really start to play with. No other reagents or supplies. You bought a computer. That's all you needed. You could keep programming. With biology, you're working not in the virtual world. You're working in the physical world, and there's always reagents and supplies and procedures and test equipment, etc. Setting up a modern biolab. It can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars today just to get the basic equipment. And if you want to do something more precision, then it goes up even more expensive.
That's where you do the
The lab,
simulation.
yeah, and so what I've really been championing is let's build a cloud lab that has all the best equipment, all the automation. It's done at small enough scales that it can be inexpensive, but it sends back really, really rich data streams about everything that's doing, everything that the robot's doing, great visualizations, really engaging animations as well, because we're getting really close to building virtual cells that you should be able to run the experiment virtually and get a molecular understanding of the processes that are going on, and then go and build it in real life and see, did the simulation match reality? And it just creates an engineering cycle that feeds itself. And I think it's going to be incredibly.
But again, going back to a younger generation, I feel like it needs to be gamified like a Roadblocks or a Minecraft, to where a community comes together and they're working together as a collaborative force as opposed to just individuals too.
Well, this is what the iGEM program does. They have really sophisticated judging. And in fact, I'm just going to give a shout out here to the McGill University team. They won the undergraduate award this year, which was really huge. And I was out in McGill earlier this year. So I'm just hugely impressed by the work that they did. But here's the thing. Are you familiar with Dean Kamen's first robotics challenges
Of course,
that
it
have
was
gone
great.
global? Of course. But there they have a clear leaderboard because everyone's working on the same challenge, right? Everyone's working to do the same thing, and they've got really, really easy scoring and metrics, and you can build a leaderboard, so it's really well gamified. The iGEM program doesn't have that because you're comparing apples to oranges to mangoes to bananas. And so it's really difficult to do that. It's very subjective scoring. Whereas I think if you have these types of engineering challenges, produce, the most amount of compound X, and you let all the kids work on that, then you're going to see some amazing creativity come out in a gamified way with a very easy metric and way to score it, and a clear leaderboard. So I think there's all sorts of different ways to play it. But remember, programming biology is just going to be so huge once we start to unlock the creative potential of the next generations coming in. And really what we have to do is just give them on ramps into this field in a way that's safe, accessible, and affordable.
Yeah,
That's what the PC did.
I agree with the PC did that. But one thing that I believe about Gen Z is they're borderless, meaning they're not, hey, I'm from this country and I'm going to do it just for this country. They're very much for their generation. There's a radical change we see. And I think it's better for the planet the way Gen Z sees themselves as opposed to the other generations where they're very nationally focused. And I wonder if we're going to see more global breakthroughs because of the collaboration of Gen Z coming together.
I'd love to see that. The iGEM program has really has kept it very open and transparent. They were inspired by a lot of the open source community. So all the past programs, all the tools, all the reagents are all open source, which is great. But now we've got kind of the next generation of that appearing, which we call decentralized science, or DeSci. And DeSci is just, if anything, it's more open than the previous generation. And more than that, we actually have a built-in economy because it can also be blockchained and cryptoed. So, projects today that are really exciting can be set up as an independent, currency essentially, where you could buy in and support it and champion it moving forward with all the information very, very transparent. So I think this is a fundamental shift in the way that science is done, research and development is done with a more transparent and more accessible than at any point in history. Because even today, if I go and try and read a science journal by some of the scientists, an article that they've published by, in Cell, Science, or Nature, these big journals that are really important for their, amongst their peers. I don't have access to those journals. They're all firewalled and paywalled. And it's like this isn't appropriate because to really get science moving, to get real feedback and communications, it's not just peer review, it is complete, societal review. And so I'm really excited by some of these new, decentralized open access and built-in, economies that can come with this next generation.
Last question. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. And that is, let's project, say, 3 to 5 years in the future. And let's pretend there were no regulatory limitations, no economic limitations, but the sky was the limit. Okay. Obviously, you have nature limitations, but if there's a lot of emphasis on what you're talking about by creating new types of proteins, by having everybody collaborate and come together, how does the human experience look different 3 to 5 years in the future?
Wow, that's a great question. 3 to 5 years is not a huge amount of time to change our human experience, but what I think is really going to be uh, really start to change people's minds is that we're going to realize that all of biology is programmable. And what I really hope to see in the next 3 to 5 years is that we cross this threshold in synthesis and assembly that allows us to build single-celled organisms. Bacteria, like that's how all life started on this planet. Billions of years ago, it was single-celled organisms. And as that becomes not science, not history, but engineering, I think we just unlocked this incredible new level of science where we get to build living creatures. Like this is not a viral genome, which viruses are basically USB sticks. These are living creatures that will grow and continue to grow and divide and in some ways evolve. I think when we break through and get to 5 million base pairs of code and microbiology becomes engineering, we are just going to accept that in some ways we are now have the capabilities of gods. We can build living organisms. Now these are single-celled organisms, not humans. These are like individual processors. The single-celled organism is like the PC of life, the personal computer of life. But they're incredibly powerful machines, and we can make them we can program them to do more and more of the things we need, making foods, making proteins, making medicines, making peptides, making, just about anything a living cell can make, doing it fast, doing it inexpensively. And I think that's going to be huge. And that's just the breaking in to, using biology as one of the most powerful tools to support humanity. As we get more and more sophisticated, we're just going to build, more and more beautiful things. It'll become multicellular, plants, animals, and eventually we'll turn these technologies to us, and who knows what will become in the future. But where that's really pushing out into the future. But yeah, this is the technology that will sustain us and help us grow, through the coming millennia.
Amazing. Andrew, people want to hunt you down, find you. What's the best place?
I am, you can find my writings on Substack and Medium. I am easy to find online. My email is out there everywhere, and I really hope you do chase me down. Find me on LinkedIn and let's start a conversation because I'm only here to help the next generation really get moving on this technology. It's coming one, whether we like it or not.
It's happening.
If you understand it and figure out how you're going to use it for yourself, for your business, your family, it'll make a huge difference in life.
Andrew Hessel, thanks a lot for hanging out with me.
Thank you, Ken.